Click that for sure. We should be good. All right. Welcome to the podcast, dude. I'm fucking pumped to do this. We just ranted about pop for 20 minutes, so this should be a good, solid sports performance podcast here.
Yeah,
You ready? You excited?
I'm ready, man.
Uh, so Wayfinder, dude. I want to start there. Yeah, you're is it Coach Wayfinder on Instagram? What's the handle on Instagram?
It's Coach Hayden Mitchell.
Oh, you switched it over.
Yeah, Coach underscore Hayden Mitchell. I've been playing with different names for a little while there, but more so just like wanted people to know who the hell I was instead of a brand.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. But the brand is Wayfinder, and that's
Yeah.
one of your big proponents. I want to start there. What does that mean, dude? Like, what is Wayfinder? What is being a Wayfinder? What does that mean to you? Where did you come up with that kind of idea, and how does that kind of apply to Hayden and who you are?
Yeah, man, I was it's always been a journey like that for me. My dad like taught me to be a seeker, like from an early age. It was kind of question everything, seek new ways always. And that's what I love about my father. Is like there was never like a settling.
Hmm.
It's like let's keep learning. Let's keep learning. Um I went through a lot of shit in 2021. You'll find maybe throughout, like I've been through a lot of hard times. Was going through a really difficult time in 2021. Went out to California, was hiking the Tequepus Trail out there. It's stunning, dude.
What is that? What is that trail?
It's kind of in between like Santa Barbara and the Wine Valley.
Okay.
Um, no one was there that day, and I'm a big believer in when you're going through hard shit, you got to put your next foot forward and like represent that through actually moving your ass and to go do hard things. Um, so it's not a 3 mile hike, right? It's like go on that fucking 12-mile hike because it's the first 3 miles. You're like, that next little bit is you're really finding out a lot about yourself. You're going to some dark spaces. You're like, why did you break up with me, man? Like, why the fuck would anybody like it hurts? So I'm going through it and I encounter this boulder. And it was a pretty epic boulder on the trail. Thank God, it didn't fall while I was hiking. And I was able to climb over it. I negotiated that. And you get to the top of this mountain, man, and the ecosystems kind of change as you're going. You get to the top of this mountain, you've got a panorama of a lake, you've got all these gorgeous trees, and then there's the Pacific Ocean. And there's just one tree. And I was like, this is why I do what I do, man, because I want people to find their way, like no matter what. And I've had other stories like that where I was going through really difficult times, and I was also climbing, in Tennessee, had to reestablish a route because I was going to die. Like if I fell, I was free climbing. I was 30 something feet in the air and there's nothing but jagged rock. And I get to the top, man. And I'm like, damn, dude, life's really worth living right now, you know? And that's really kind of where it came from, man. I was like, I just help people find their way. And, Wayfinder just represents, being able to take on whatever life throws at you. It's how I started my classes at University of Alabama when I teach them. It's like, look, this is like the study and, just developing a tremendous skill set. You're going to have a lot of tools after this. Somebody's mom's going to get breast cancer like mine did. Somebody's going to die. Some of y'all are going to get STDs. That's going to break your heart. You're going to get your heart broken. There's so many things that may happen. And so what kind of tools are we developing? Just not just the physical skill set, but it's like mind, soul, right? So that's really what Wayfinder sort of represents as far as a story behind it.
And I'm really interested because I feel like I have a very similar mindset. And it took me a while to get there because I was very much not seeking the path. I was following paths already created. And I kept following these paths, dude. And I would get to the end. I was like, that's it? Like and I was like, oh man. It's like I just followed that person's path all the way, like step for step. Like if Hayden drew a path for me, I would go follow it because I was inspired by Hayden. I'd follow it to the end, and I would just get to where you were. And it taught me a lot, learned some lessons, but it taught me what you knew, right? It didn't teach me anything about myself. And the fields that I was in and the fields that we're currently in, I feel like is very much a field of following the path in front of you, right? Following the steps that are already made, the paths that are already made, following the mentor, And I feel like our field is not very good at seeking the new ways, as you said your dad taught you to do. So how was that kind of like, was there a culture shock when you got kind of into our field and like doing this type of thing where it's like, dude, what are we talking about? Like of all the things that are going on in life and all the things that are going on around us, or the and even just straight athletically, like the athletes in front of us, we're saying one thing because people before us have said that. And I'm looking at it and it's not making any sense at all. Like, what are we talking about? Was there a culture shock moment there for you to where you're like, dude, something's up here?
Dude, I spent like the first decade just spouting off shit, that I was led to believe by somebody else, you know. Um, I have so many regrets, like with the coaching and the shit I've said and the things I was wrong about, right? But you know what you know in the moment. I don't know that I ever really had a culture shock in a sense where, whenever I entered into the field, I was an inner city teacher, you know. I'd come from coaching soccer at 16 years old, and that's when it started. And we talked about concussions, and you know, I wasn't able to continue play after my senior year. So it had to be about coaching for me because I love to compete. Getting to inner cities, and I'm from, like talked about before we hopped on this. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, man. It's a violent place to be. I was at a soccer practice one time. We see the police drive by. One of them's not the police. It's a guy who stole a cop car. He killed a cop. Okay.
Gee.
So we hear gunshots all the time, man. They come into the neighborhood behind us and we just hear pop, 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 pop. And we're kind of used to it. So I'm just practicing soccer with a group of kids never played before, and the police come over, they're like, you not hear the gunshots? It's like, well, man, it's pretty normal, average day in life here. And they were like, you gotta go, you gotta go. So that was kind of the environment I grew up in, where it was like, you always have to adapt. You can't be stuck on one way of doing things. You know, it was, and then whenever you're around it, ridiculously good athletes, which Mobile produces that, right? I mean, there's just tons of NFL guys, so many great athletes around here. You notice that all your best laid plans, they're not going to fit within their model because they're better than you are. Like, that's the issue I see with a lot of coaches. Like, you're not fucking good at sports compared to your athletes. Like, you want to be an athlete. You wish. There's very few like Blaine McConnells out there, man. Most of us can't do that shit. you know? And so I never really got pigeonholed into a one way of thinking. I just kept going through stages of discovery, where I'd put a barbell on the bottom of my feet and go, I think this could be a leg press. Just started practicing and I ended up finding out is old school strongman stuff,
Mm.
you know. But a lot of it was just play based, letting the athletes take over and sort of an intuition that, they had better answers than I did.
Dude, that one line right there, that and the thing before, it's like we are not at like this is what just most coaches will not accept because we've spent years of studying it, years of learning about it. But we have spent such little time, and most of us have very little capability of actually doing it and being it, right? And those are two very, very different things. Like all the time, coaches make fun of. This is kind of the funny part. Coaches make fun of coaches that are like textbook. They make fun of like the sports scientists. They're like they're not in the field. They're not actually being a coach. They're not actually coaching. They're not actually doing things. They're just reading about it. And I'm like, dude, that's what you're doing with your athletes. You're just reading about being an athlete. You're just reading about being a coach. You're just coaching. You're not actually being that athlete. And once you accept that and realize, like, dude, these guys see and move and feel in almost like an alternate like dimension than we do. And it's different. Like I
Yeah.
talk to some of these high level athletes and you're like, dude, what? Like that's what you're seeing there. That's how you felt that. Like pass rushers are my favorite because, like, yeah, dude, I saw his hand there and it was coming this way, and I thought it was like, how? I saw a big motherfucker in front of me and I just ran my face into him. Like, how did you see all of that in that little amount of a time? And it's like, I just feel like we have such a disconnect. We create these systems all around, like this bullshit that we talk about. And none of it is actually experiencing what the athlete's experiencing and being with the athlete in front of us. And then we try to force these beautiful athletes into these systems that are created off like a false view of the world.
Yeah. I mean, Kareem said you play with your soul, right? And I think that's the big thing for me is, not getting so caught up in the structure, the system, the science of it all. Because when I do that, I see numbers and I forget the soul that's in front of me. But whenever I see it the other way, that's whenever all these adaptations really start to happen, you know? And it's unexplainable. I mean, you talk about like these athletes, they're able to like slow down the pictures in their head. If I one of my goalkeepers, he'd never played it before. This is an inner city school, we're playing against one of the best teams in the state. He's way out of position, but he's a football player. He played safety, he played college ball, and he played some arena league. He's a freak athlete. I watched him jump twice in the air. I've never seen anybody do that before. Like he's so far out of position, he leaps, and then it looked like he had another platform underneath him, and he kept rising. And Hunter and I, my assistant, was like, "What the hell did we just watch, man?" But if you put him on a force plate, if you put him on a jump mat, probably 31-inch vertical. In that moment, I have no idea what he just did, but I've never seen anything like it in my life. You know? And we can't fucking train that. I have no idea how to train that level of genius. And I think that's where you and I kind of like agree. It's like if I blend physical education and play, I might be able to create athletic genius. I might be feeding into that to where they're slowing the game down in the moment and they see all these opportunities that otherwise they wouldn't have seen if we didn't explore it. You
Yeah,
know?
that is such a good point because it is, and it's not even like we're creating it. We're just exposing them to the ability to like learn it themselves. Like that. That's what I really feel like the facilitator of just putting them in an environment in which they can learn what their genius is. Like, what is that for you? What are your moves? What is the way that you see? And then being comfortable and accepting those moves, that genius that you possess. And I just feel like a lot of times we shove like our genius, like the genius of sports performance, down these athletes' throats and force them all to be the same level of genius. And then all the athletes kind of just turn into these same like blocks of the same, like it's like that's not genius, like that's a carbon copy. It's like the Boyle factory system. It's like the same athletes over and over and over. And then you have the survivorship bias of the athletes that have that genius from either a god-given talent or they found it themselves in some other dimension, like in some other training environment, whatever it is, something clicked with them. Some athletes just have that like very deep connection to it, they survive, and the other ones they're just kind of mid and they're just kind of going through. What is like your, like if I were to come to train with you, how would you help me find my genius? Like what would that look like? What would like a training session look like? What, like how would that be to where you would be like, all right, I'm going to help Austin find his like genius. I'm going to help him try to learn how to be a genius in these kind of settings.
It depends on the setting, right? Like where the gym is, buddy. Like my new gym is sick. There's no AC. I'm in the deep south. You're just sweating your ass off in there. There's old school strongman equipment, pieces of equipment like old these like strongmen have built it themselves. You've got kegs, you've got the stones, we've got racks, and then there's like actually people that'll end up doing like pole vaulting and stuff. So there's just all this stuff available. But as far as like when you enter into a space with me, I call it rhythm and grace. I'm trying to create opportunities for you to discover sort of graceful movement. The reason why we do obsess over any athlete's highlight is because there's an element of beauty and grace mixed in with hellacious amount of power. So what does that look like? Obviously, it can look like any type of crawling. It can look like any type of play-based game. I love setting timers, just saying, here's a few things. Here's a ball. Here's a box. Here's the wall. I need you guys to create a game in the next 3 minutes. I love that. That's one of my favorite physical education models. We call it games invention. Once they kind of discover like structure, like you can teach them like these various like pedagogical models. Once they kind of understand like real rules and structure, you just give it to them. You got a basketball and a soccer ball. You're going to play with two balls. I don't know how the fuck you're going to do it, but I need you to create rules. And there's going to be a scoring system. And I think with that, that's where you start to foster that, leadership, the ability to follow as part of it. I always find that to be interesting. It's like, who's going to take a step back and let somebody else create? A lot of times it's the overly analytical kid that comes up with the rules, but he isn't responding reactionary in the game, right? So you're giving these kids all these opportunities to explore their level of genius. And I think within that, hopefully, you start to find that level of creativity that we're searching for.
Hmm.
And creativity doesn't look like speed, power, and strength always, right?
Absolutely. And the rhythm and fluidity and grace and it's Joel Smith. I just got done with a seminar with him last month, and he was really talks about the feminine side of training, the masculine and the feminine side, and trying to find that balance. And
I
one of
love
the
that.
things I do too, the way that he frames it, it's super nice. But
Yeah.
how we've gone so masculine that even touches of the feminine side of training is super nice. And one of the things that I've introduced to my athletes is some of the shaking and just like relaxation type models that we're doing. And like right away, they notice such a difference. And for me, it's like they've gone from shit to good with the masculine side of things. And a lot of them have gone from good to great in the masculine side of things, but they're all at just like they're just terrible at the feminine side and just touching those things. And the really good athletes pick those things up really quick and they're already at good to great and you can bring them there. But the really bad athletes, the really stiff athletes, really struggle to get into some of those feminine side of training.
Yeah.
Have you found like tools for yourself and tools for your athletes to really touch on that feminine side of training and get them into that feminine side of training where you really are get focused on that rhythm and grace side of training, and especially like the bigger blockier meatheads? I saw you training two big defensive lineman type guys.
Yeah.
Like those guys, like they have the masculine side, man, and they're ripped and they're huge and they're monsters. Are there movements, are there things that you're working with them that you're like, okay, they need to get them? And I think one of the things too, I would like to know your thought process too, because I think one of the reasons the feminine side is touched on so little is a lot of the feminine stuff, it looks so goofy and it looks so silly and it's really hard to measure. Like shaking, it looks goofy. And like, how do you get your athletes to like work into those things and like kind of play around with like the feminine side of things without them like, oh, this dude's just a fucking weird movement yogi guy?
Yeah, I think I represent like the masculine though. Like that's kind of part of it. I walked in the inner cities and I was already pretty jacked, and they watch me throw a sledgehammer around. I can throw football, baseball further than, like part of it is you have to be a damn good athlete.
Mm,
You got to know and you got to speak that language, man. You got to have an aura about you. There's a charisma about you. If you don't have that shit, nobody's following you anyway. You know, there's just a knowing. The thing is, man, like I've always been tapped into kind of that feminine too. I was listening to Ani DeFranco and shit when I was 20. Fiona Apple was always on, like all these different kind of musicians. My dad kind of raised me to weave in and out of that stuff too. As far as like practices go, obviously you can roll with like Panta Re, the Latin, which is like everything's always flowing. Through somatic therapy, I've found that I love to practice something called like willow tree or waves. I can represent that. I have no issue with that as far as like, all right, I want y'all to move with flow and we're going to slow it down. And then I want to see if you can kind of speed it up, right? And we'll start to find and negotiate space in a different way. If you follow me long enough, you'll just roll down where it's like this mix of savagery meets this gentleness and this flow. Like I have one where I'm standing in the river and just, trying to mimic what the water's doing, right? Getting athletes to tap into that may be difficult for those who don't practice it, but I'm intentional about my practice, right? I have yet to find an elite human being that doesn't have all of that. A journaling practice, a reading practice, that there is some soulful element to their day, that they've got some type of breath work, yoga work, whatever, to kind of slow themselves down. And so just introducing that into their world, they feel it right away. I think you've probably felt that too. It's like yesterday I was hanging from the bar and I'm doing spinal waves, right? Give an athlete that really quickly, like, holy shit. In the next like 2 minutes, oh my God, that feels pretty amazing. Now I feel like I can move a bit. And I like the Conor McGregor shit where he's like, he walks with that swagger for a reason. Because you want to feel like a motherfucking animal. And I don't want to be stiff.
The introduction piece, that's exactly that's where I have found that balance. Expose them to all of these feminine tools and then let them use the feminine tools that they want to use and that work with them. And I think a lot of coaches, they get just too pushy with a lot of the things. It's like if that's not the thing for the athlete, if that athlete is weirded out by that or whatever, it's like I don't care. It's like I think we're attached too much into these tools and these things. It's like I have athletes that hate meditation, and I have athletes that meditation has completely changed their life, like completely. And they've told me, and dude, this is like I can't believe. I've had athletes that like yoga is just not their thing, and the yoga is the thing that like gets them going and moving. I have athletes where the shakes are just instant and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to do this every day and this feels amazing. And some of the
Yeah.
crawls and the hangs. And then I have athletes that are like, dude, this looks goofy. And I think that's one of the best things like that I've accepted recently is like, it's an intro, man. I just want to introduce you to some of these things because I wasn't. I felt like I wasn't. Like I was exposed to a lot of the masculine stuff and none of the other things. And I
Yeah.
had to go like experiment with the feminine side of things that worked with my life. And I think the more we can just give these, because like you said, once they find their tool, again, you don't have to become full. Again, you can't be full feminine side and have no masculine and then go be an elite level athlete. Like there has to be that balance, right? But you just give them touches of it and then see which parts and things resonate with them with where they are currently at. And a lot of times, again, it's part of that genius like journey themselves. They figure out and they know what's best for them. And the things that resonate for a reason. And it works with their bodies and their minds and their spirit. And let them be with that. Don't force anything else onto them. Just like expose, introduce them to it, and then see where that practice takes them. And then again, I think what you were saying too, it's like I get all these questions about buy-in. Every fucking week I do a Q&A, dude. They ask about buy-in every
I
week.
know.
And it's like, dude, you just got to be it. Like Nietzsche talks about, it's like you just have to be it. Like you have to be the coach that they respect and that has nothing to do with like becoming some weird character of yourself. It's just like being somebody worth respecting, like being somebody worth
Yeah.
following, being somebody worth buying into. And then you can expose, then they trust you enough to like work and experiment on some of the things they're less comfortable with. But I just feel like so many coaches create this weird like character in these things, and then these
Eat.
athletes
We're gonna eat.
they
The
smell it. Like athletes
same
smell it,
shit.
and then
Why?
it's like,
Fuck yeah, they do, man.
and
An
they're like,
athlete
why?
will
Why do
read.
my athletes not buy in? Why do they not? Well, you're not being a real human. They know it right away. They're not going to be real humans to a non-real human. It's like talking to a computer, bro. They know it. They can feel it. They can smell it. And it's like, of course, they're not being real with you. Of course, they're not totally buying into the things that you're doing because that's it. You're not buying into the things you're doing. You're not buying into yourself enough for them to believe it. You're being a character.
I think that's it, man. And I have this conversation with a colleague of mine, if I ever finish my doctorate, which not, we'll talk about that maybe another time, but um, we talk about it's like, what does it mean to teach somebody to be cool? You know, is you can have all the pedagogical models, you can have all the systems, you can have your rules, your routines, all your expectations in place. The greatest compliment you can receive, especially, with our athletes and a lot, I mean, it sounds to me like maybe you're in a similar situation sometimes where these people aren't coming from a whole lot, is when they say that's a real one. Like Coach Mitchell's a real one. Austin's a real one, you know, and just being like the word I'm obsessing over right now, and I think it can be a guiding philosophy. I'm always searching for teachers, whether that's a human being or a phrase or whatever, is sincerity. It's authenticity, it's honesty, there's truth in it, and that's what athletes are searching for, man. And you got to be real with them. One of the best things I do, you talk about the feminine, my probably my greatest skill set is being able to read somebody, like, really tap in and ask those dark, kind of deeper questions and to draw that from them and to know more about their life. because I genuinely care, especially when you coming from the backgrounds I've come from, man, like you got to care a whole lot, because oftentimes I was the only father figure in their life, right? And so you really got to tap into that. You're playing the mother and the father role sometimes, so you got to have that masculine and feminine energy. There needs to be a gentleness and then a hardened discipline, you know.
And even just to start, like with the first thing you and I talked about, how you were talking about how you used to get yelled at for telling the athletes about the drugs and the things that you were doing and like having, but like the biggest thing, because I had that like I stuck with it for so long of just like trying to ignore what my athletes were doing, what my athletes were using, all of these things. And again,
Mhm.
it was creating a fairy tale. It's like I didn't want to deal with it, but it was like just put darkness over all of it and never had any real conversation. As soon as I just started having real conversations with my athletes about those things, it's like, oh my God, I see where you're at. And it's like, okay, we're doing all these metrics, we're talking about all these things. It's like, dude, you broke up with your girlfriend and got fucking stupid high last night and you're trashed today. But like I couldn't even have that basic level conversation because drugs were off the table. They weren't a sports performance like conversation. It's like how about we just be real with the athletes and have real conversations and educate them about these things and like ask them questions and being like, and it's not saying go smoke pot. That's not the conversation
No,
you're
no.
having with your athletes. It's not like here's how you get like you're not drug dealing with them. You're not doing it. You're not even suggesting anything at all. It's just having a real conversation. It's like you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old idiots for the most part that are completely lost and going through one of the hardest parts of your life where you're evolving into like 17 different characters at a time, figuring out who the fuck you are on this planet.
Yeah, man, you
And you're
playing all the roles,
experimenting
right?
and all your friends are
Yeah,
messing around with things. It's like, okay,
yeah.
maybe that's step one. Like, just have, okay, what are you doing, dude? Like, what's going on here? Why do you have mood swings? Like, why do you feel like trash on this morning? And just, I don't know, man. It's just, once I let down that barrier and had those conversations with the athletes, it just, okay, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think you should make your own like choices there. But if you're feeling this way and you're making these choices and these choices are affecting how you feel, maybe like we tweak some of these things and maybe like we experiment or talk about it again just a little bit deeper than just the straight sets and reps in front of you. And once you get there, the sets and reps become so easy because now they're actually becoming the person they want to become and they're making a little bit of life progress. And once they start making life progress, dude, gym progress is the easiest fucking thing in the world.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's addictive whenever you start to find yourself, you know. You never want that to end. Like, whoa, that is me. I'm connecting with the deepest parts of myself. I don't have to be what everybody else wants me to be. I think a lot of people are also afraid to change the caricature they've created,
Oh, 100%, dude.
and you see that in the social media space all the time, right? It's like, man, like, what's that like? What's that like to keep playing that up, But my boys get caught up in that too, It's well, I've always been this way. I'm afraid to, what's going to happen, I'm going to lose my friend group. I hope so.
Yeah.
Hope so. I hope you get new friends, man, because you will, you know. But yeah, I think it's tough with young men. They receive a lot of fucked up messaging right now. Particularly, it's like, I'm supposed to have big dick energy, but I've got to be vulnerable. Which one is it, right? It's something I talk about a lot. It's like big dick energy sure looks like narcissism. It's like, I don't want to be a narcissist. And it's like, well, you want to be vulnerable, but don't be too vulnerable, you know? And I think they're struggling with that. And at the University of Alabama, I saw just so many body dysmorphic boys, right? It's so broken. Like, what am I supposed to look like? Who am I supposed to be? And they were struggling with eating disorders on a level I did not know existed, you know. And that's kind of the other stuff we're dealing with. It's like it's beyond the drugs and stuff. It's also just like the insecurity of what they look like, you know. And they look to people like me or maybe you and they see a strong guy. It's like maybe you don't know all the darkness like behind the story. Like there's a story behind this. Whenever I have really visible abs, somebody's broken up with my ass. It's like, what's your diet? Sadness. Yeah.
Dude, we might have our Instagram clip there, right there. the most real Instagram clip we've ever had right there by the Wayfinder himself, dude. One of the things that you're talking about with the characters too, this was such an eye opener to me, is we talk about how they get stuck playing these characters, but for me, and this is own personal journey, but before my mushroom trip, it was like I didn't even know, dude. I didn't even know they were characters. Didn't even know. They were just defense mechanisms. Instant, automatic. I thought I was making all these choices. I thought I was living life, man. I thought I was doing, then I was like, went on the psychedelic trip, did everything there and was just shown it's like as soon as like stimulus A was given to you, you always 100% of the time chose option A, like reaction A, you know. As soon as stimulus B was given to you, you choose character C, right? Every single time. And I was like, "Oh my God, dude. I didn't even realize." Like, and that's one of the things, and the biggest eye opener is like trying to get my athletes, and it's been such a rewarding experience of just like getting the athletes like, dude, you don't need to play that. You don't need to play that here. You don't like, and all of us fall back into them too. And then like being all right with athletes falling back into characters and being like, okay, that's all that happened there. You're like, you just fell back into that defense. Like you get hyper aggressive when this situation happens to defend your ego, to defend like
Yeah,
your space in the hierarchy. But here's the thing, dude, you're set. We don't have a hierarchy here. Like you're okay. Like it's you don't need to climb. You don't need to defend anything here. You don't need to defend your worth. Like
yeah,
you're enough just here, right? You know, and
right.
I think that having those conversations with my athletes has been so rewarding. It's like just giving them a space where they don't have to defend and they don't have to pull up those characters and just letting them know, hey, that's just a reaction. Like, and because so many times, like they react, they hyper react really quick, and then they come back down. They're like, "I'm sorry," and it's like it's okay. It's like that's all that was. But it's like I would do that
Yeah,
without even real. Like I had just had nobody. I just didn't realize that's what it was. I just thought that I was just that person. It was always the stimulus's fault, that thing's fault. That's why, you know. And it was never, oh, that's your 100% your like protect. I talk about protecting the inner child. Like that was just protecting your inner child. Like all of this stuff. And I'm, dude, I saw it so clearly too in all the trips I've taken to almost every single time. It's like the coolest thing for me in this. Oh, dude, we're gonna get fucking woo woo here, but it was like I've seen
man, I love woo
I've seen so many
woo.
times just like in these psychedelic trips where it takes me to the baby version. Let's say the baby version, Hayden, you did me wrong. It would take me to the baby version of you within you. So it would be like at your heart, it would be the baby version of you operating the big body of Hayden and defending just that person and the inner person. And I thought that was so cool. And just seeing myself do it too. It's like, oh, you have these big, strong muscles. You did all these things to defend. They just have armor around like the person inside. And I was like, you look and you just see it with athletes. Like, oh, you became really fast to like have something like the climb something to defend that thing inside. And that's why you're really fast. And then having that conversation with them and be like, okay, like, is it because so many athletes too, they struggle with like they don't really love the sport. And it's like having conversations with them about that. It's like it's not the sport that they like, it's that they have worth, and having worth in our society is like I think for especially for young men, putting them on a hero's journey and giving them a reason. But
Yeah,
I don't think heroes' journeys are bad. I don't think defending that thing and like climbing hierarchies are a bad thing. It's just I think you should know why you're doing it, right? Like I think just at least having an understanding in some sense of this is at least why I'm doing it, and then maybe I can start to gravitate to doing it for a better reason. But I try to break my athletes as much as possible out of those automative roles without them like so many just don't even realize it, man. They just have they have no reason why they try to lift as hard as humanly possible and break their bodies every single time. And it's like once you like feel that psychedelic experience, you can just point it out. It's so night and day difference of like, oh, that's why. It has nothing to do with scoring the touchdowns. It has a lot to do with this like bit of the defense mechanism and this character that you built up and having that conversation. And again, it's not getting rid of doing these things because I still think it's worth it, dude. Like we're on Earth, like to do cool things. I think it's worth it to go do cool things and pursue cool tasks. I just think a lot of times once you pursue those cool tasks with the wrong end in mind, with the wrong thought process of, oh, I'm going to find myself, I'm going to do all these things there. And you get to the end, it's just so depressing because it's like, oh, you did that all for a lie. Like it was all a fairy tale that you just didn't want to face. And if you just face that fairy tale at the front end, then you can go do cool things and achieve them. And at the end, it's so much more rewarding. It's like, oh, I actually learned about myself here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's really difficult about selling point in the social media space, right? It's like, and I'm not successful with it by any means. It's like, yeah, I think the easiest thing in the world is to create power, strength, speed. In the physical domain, it's very simple. There really is like predictable models for me to utilize whatever system. Throw a periodization system at it, you're going to develop it. But it is like you talk about like a hero's journey. Are we taking like a capitalist sort of hero's journey where we're overcoming hard things and all these barriers to find that level of societal success? Or is it a soulful hero's journey, which is what you go on a psychedelic trip if you've ever done ayahuasca or psychedelic mushrooms or anything like that? Like there's deeper layers to this stuff. And it's dark, man. And people are afraid to go there, you know? I mean, I have my buddies, like one of my buddies is Brett Bartholomew, the art of coaching, right?
Mm.
And he's like, Hayden, he basically said this. Hayden, the coolest thing about you, man, is that you're willing to go deep. The worst thing about you is that you're willing to go deep. Because some people are not ready for that shit. And that's what's tough as a coach, is you want them to be able to take that really deep dive and that discovery. But you know these people, man. Like I'm working with one right now. His eyes are everywhere. I think his heart's somewhere in another room, his soul's elsewhere, his mind's elsewhere. Like he's never truly like here and present. Because he's afraid, he's so scared to sit alone. That's why meditation's terrifying for some people.
Mhm.
They're afraid I don't want to go for a walk by myself. And if I go for that walk by myself, I've got to have headphones in, right? They're afraid, you know? And helping them overcome that fear, I think, is like the greatest challenge of my life, in a lot of ways. And like that's the coach's journey for me. Is people are just hanging on so dearly to whatever they think their personality is supposed to be. And a lot of men, they're coming from a place of anger, rage, frustration. They've been told those traits are toxic, but they don't know how to utilize them. And I was that person too. When anger comes, it's like, all right, that's what being irrational looks like. Let me learn from that. And I don't know about you, but whenever I'm pissed off, that's when my best writing happens.
Mm.
So I write on one side of the page, angry Hayden. And the other side of the page is like, all right, what does it look like to deliver this to an audience? You know, and I love that practice. But, that's the thing with our athletes. It's like, yeah, I'm going to take care of you in the physical domain. But if you don't have like these tools built in, maybe at 18 to 22, you can get away with it. But when life starts to knock the fucking hell out of you, because it will, it's inevitable. I don't care what your socioeconomic background is. You're going to get your ass kicked. Do you have these other skills? Or are you going to keep repeating the same cycle of rage, anger, frustration, blaming everybody else for your shit, and not coming to terms with who the fuck you really are and what you're supposed to be?
Mm. Fuck yeah, dude. All right. Gonna go 180 and we're gonna go so practical, dude. I'm walking into you day one. Maybe it's not day one. Maybe let's say you've been working with me, but just give me like, okay, what day is today? Today's Thursday. Today's Thursday. What's give me a Thursday, dude. What's Thursday look like? Give me the warm up to the conversation to like the workout to the speed to the like to end like how are you balancing everything? Because you look at your page, you got so much shit, dude. Like you have so much good stuff, and I'm the same way. Like I have everything, and everybody wonders like how do you the creative minds like put it into a practice? Like what are we training today? What are we doing? Give me like a full bit by bit session, and how does that look? And like you having them go for a walk by themselves to start and then bringing them back in and then we're doing an actual warm up like what's it actually look like when you're training those two big defensive linemen that are preparing for the NFL like what do these sessions actually look like?
Yeah, so we've got 12 weeks with them, right? Um, so all of the kind of like the deeper the inner work, like all of that, that's happening between sets right now in a lot of ways. And then I'll start to ask them, like, we're just getting to know each other again. Like, I know these boys, but like really getting fine-tuned in like what their body needs. So one of their brothers, but they're fraternal twins. One of them, he's a twisted, kind of mangled sort of athlete from previous injury. So I'm realizing yesterday I went in and I practiced what I'm going to do. And so I was doing a lot of hanging work, some sort of spinal flows, and we're going to try to resolve some of these holding patterns.
And that'll be the first thing you do day one, or like
Yeah.
first warm up part.
And especially with him, because I'm going to
Yep.
get kind of separate today. His other, like the other brother, if you watched like the 305 pounder, like he's kind of got it as far as like some of the flowing skills. And I'll tell you why. It's because he practices Muay Thai.
Mm.
So he's kind of in tune with all of that. So with him, he doesn't require as much of the sort of woo-woo and the skill of learning how to manipulate his body in space, whereas his brother absolutely needs all of those things. So what are they going to get today? Kind of two different styles of warm-ups. I'm going to approach the bigger one with a lot of attacking intent. You
Mm.
know, he's a defensive tackle, and we're going to level up, and I'm going to start hitting him a little bit because I love human contact. Like, I think human touch matters so much. Whereas the other brother, he's going to get kind of the flowing, the woo-woo. He's going to feel weird.
So
But
what's the
there,
human contact thing look like? Well, like what are you doing with like
one of my favorite drills to do is just locking up hands and hitting each other in the shoulder, ruck style. Because I did an internship in South Africa, and rugby is sexy as hell.
yeah, I love
So
rugby, dude. I trained the
you're
whole
trying to get that kind of like that low leverage opportunity for these guys. And that's where we start to develop some of the movement skills with him. But yeah, man, coming in. But today it's going to be really basic as far as just hinge patterns. We're going to approach it from a power position, a strength position, and then I'll build up a couple little accessory movements, and I have to change those almost every single time, right? It's just what are they showing me? Do they actually need a pump right now at end range? Do we need to explore in that way? Do they need Jefferson curls? Have they ever been exposed to that before? You know? And as we go, we'll start to approach more old time strongman stuff. But right now, I'd say it's probably looks a little bit more like Tim Karen's work with like strength deficit, really simple, Will Rittel's kind of stuff, you know?
so like let's say it's a hinge day today. You're gonna go broad jump, RDL, and then something deep range of motion. Like, is
Yeah,
that kind of the thought process today?
yeah. One of them's got some really good skill set with the Olympic lifts. The other one doesn't. So
Okay.
we're gonna have to approach kind of two different ways. So one of them's gonna do snatches, and the other one will kind of do snatch pulls with that first power movement.
Hell yeah.
And then we are gonna come from. I think both of them need more of a staggered RDL right now. I don't think they trust their body kind of in space and balance. I don't have time for them to not get the stimulus based on not having balance. We'll build that elsewhere.
Mm. Hell yeah, dude. I wanted to run through that because when we go woo woo, a lot of people shut it off, and then it's like I know you have the masculine like thing where it's all tied together, you know. And I think that's what a lot of people just don't respect it enough. It's like as soon as you talk about something just a tiny bit out, it's like, oh, this dude doesn't do anything with the other dude. He's still getting stimulus. Like again, like that last line you had there. It's like I don't have time for them not to get the stimulus done. It's like yeah, that's like a lot of us, you know. It's like it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's just like appreciating things just a little bit more and looking at it just like one or two levels deeper than throwing the same RDL program at them for 15 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, within the warm up, like it can be a 1 by 20 pump session, right? Where you're just doing end range shit. I love that. And it can also look like absolute war and chaos beforehand, right? And then it's introducing that at the end. And there's obviously it's the conversations in between. Like I'm just sharing as much life with them as I possibly can. But I'm 38 years old. I've been through a lot of shit. They lost their daddy when they were in high school,
Hmm.
you know. They've been through really hard times. I'm going through hard times and always have. I've been right there in the trenches with them. And so we can really have those deeper conversations, and I think that's probably one of the best things as far as you can't ask for wisdom without suffering. And I've been through that. And I don't wear that as this badge of honor like I used to, where you just like become the victim.
Mm.
Like I just live in this victimhood. Woe is me. No one understands what I've been through. At some point, you take on that Greek philosopher role where it's like, all right, I've achieved a certain level of understanding. Now I've got to share that wisdom. And what that looks like for each individual can be different. But, with these boys, it's a matter of, you know, giving them as many of these practices beyond the physical domain because they're growing up in the inner cities. It's so masculine, you know. So what are you doing? They play jazz music. How
Mhm.
dope is that? Right? It's like keep tapping into that even more. What else can you do creatively? You know, and so now one of them's starting to make like a food page. He makes these like beautiful meals, right? So it's like those little things. I love that about the coaching. It's like drawing out that artistic side.
And one of the things I found, and I'm sure you found it too, is like once you get them to like do that, a lot of times the sport improves because they're able to take a little bit of a deep breath. Dude, that's what I found,
Yeah.
especially for my own self too. It's like when the masculine, the sport is the only thing you have the rest of your head on, whether you love it and enjoy it or not, it's the only thing you feel like you provide worth in. It is so much pressure every single play. And once you can like just take even a food page, even like like anything, jazz music, whatever it is, like even for some athletes, it's crazy. It's like a video game. It's like giving them something to just like, okay, you also have this thing over here to just like, you have a community over here that if you have a bad practice, you make a bad play, it is not the end of the world. You're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And just right there, it's like those are the kind of conversations like, all right, like we have a goal. I have no idea if you're gonna hit it. So what happens? What else? Because you're gonna, you know, no matter what, it's like, you know, these people, they get to a platform. I think you've coached cyclists before, or obviously like athletes that end up like there's one, you know, it's one on one the whole time. They get to that platform and they go, okay, what's next? I got there. What's next? Who am I? You know, a lot of ex-athletes are like that, right? Like, what am I now? And so that's kind of the, you know, what we're trying to build in, you know, those conversations in between. Like, all right, what now? Like, what are you going to do? And I think that's where, you know, I want to take these boys, and that's where I always want to take anybody, you know, no matter who they are.
Hell yeah. Last practical question, then I want to get to the things that you're doing with your dad because I think that's the fucking coolest thing of all of this things that you are doing in your life right now. It's so fucking cool just to watch that. But you talk about today being a hinge day. Could you lay out like what a week looks like? I know a lot of coaches like they kind of get stuck in their like own like programming like ways and like they can't they think like max low. I
Yeah.
can't like what's that look like? What's a week? If you just generally look like Monday, Tuesday, like how when you're working with these for the 12 weeks, what's that kind of look like?
I love the conversation I just had with a strong man. He's like, Alabama's like strongest man. He's like, they don't fucking understand overtraining. He's like, it's impossible to get to a state of over. He's like, he lifted raw 985. He's like, it took me 3 months to bounce back from that. I was like, yeah. So when you and I talk about like max effort day, that ain't really max effort day. It's like Ed Cohen. It's like that dude, he had to take like 6 months off after his shit, right? So for me, it's like getting to a place where I know that they have yet to experience 10 out of 10 as far as like pure performance output. Anybody can make somebody sore and sweaty. I give 10-year-olds a list of 100 exercises, pick 12, run them through it. It's so fucking easy. But with this stuff, it's like, all right, there's predictable models I'm playing with. I like kind of the conjugate style a little bit as far as switching up the lift week to week, but still trying to achieve a similar outcome. We're going to train two upper, two lower because they're linemen and I need them to recover. And we're doing a lot of acceleration and speed work twice a week on the lower body day. There's going to be a special event. I think this is one thing I really loved about being in physical education program with my doctorate. There's a model called sport education. Within that model, at the end of that model, when the kids are done playing soccer or football or korfball, maybe that's something you never heard of.
No.
They had a special event. Every kid would play like a role, but they had a special event. So we're doing a special event once a week. On Saturday, there's show up and we're going to train with the strongmen. It's like, this is where strongmen in Alabama train. Dope. It's going to be fucking awesome. They're going to be exposed. They're going to find out a lot about themselves. We're going to have an NFL combine, and then their job is to find enough players to where we go out and they're football players and I watch them do their fucking speed ladders. I'm dropping a soccer ball down and we're playing soccer at one of our local parks. Those are our special events right now.
Hell yeah.
They also are getting homework because I believe in training 7 days a week, especially right now. I don't think I'm worried about peaking them at the right time. I don't have Dr. Matt Ray's, scientific tools anyway. So, so we're just gonna push it, man. Their homework is end range mobility work.
And
That's what
so they're with you for like 4 days. They have 3 days of homework, or are they with you with the 5 days? Is the fifth day that special day, and then the 2 days
yeah,
in range
yeah.
mobility?
The idea is to get them with me 5 days a week. And then those other days, it's kind of dependent on what they're feeling. You
Okay.
know, I've got one I've got to solve some spine shoulder stuff with, so he's getting other stuff. Other ones like he's obviously doing Muay Thai. I need him to tap in more into his creative outlets. Like it's kind of holding him accountable to these new accounts he's made, right?
That's
I'm gonna
cool.
be watching that. Like you haven't posted new food yet, bud. All you've done is your watermelon juice. I need something else, man. What does it mean to eat like, these are like black folks from the hood, man. It's like, what does healthy soul food look like?
Mm.
You know? Show them the way.
Yeah, that's badass. That homework is badass, dude. I fucking love that part of it. It's like he already has the physical side. Like, how can you push the other things? Yeah, that's sick. And then one that doesn't have the physical side, there's stuff to do there with him. I think that's fucking sweet. Okay, dude. Now let's get to it. Work with your dad right now. Kind of tell me that story. What's going on there?
Well, if you know me, you know my dad, he's a physical, dude. He's an intense guy. He has a lot of passion, literary in a lot of ways. He raised me on like song lyrics, man, and just like that was our love language. We'd send each other like all these different like playlists and stuff. So I've got this kind of vast knowledge of all
What
this
type of music? What type of music we talking about?
everything, man, everything but Nashville pop country.
Okay.
Just about everything but that. And we have a
What's Nashville
distinct
pop country? What counts as that? Like,
and
what is it?
Florida Georgia line, shit like that.
Oh God, yeah.
I don't want to hear you rapping, within the country music, man.
Yeah.
Like, I love outlaw country, man. Like Towns Van Zandt, Guy Clark. I think Zach Bryan's done a pretty good job of bringing that to relevance a little bit. A lot of bros are on that, and I'm all about that shit. I'm
Hell
glad
yeah.
that's a literary genius, man. And I think you need that. But that, he's a constant learner, like we talked about, and he's been through a lot, man, like a lot of hard labor. I watched him go through, this is like clouded fear. You talk about like solopreneur journey, right? He owned a plant nursery. He's a farm boy from Greensboro, Alabama, man. And he had a nursery, and Katrina and kind of Ivan sort of kicked our ass and like everybody's ass around here. Files Chapter 11 bankruptcy when I'm 20. Okay, so we're just like it's kind of this process to where he finally becomes an OSHA safety officer. Okay, so he's working his ass off, man, really long days. Finally retires. All right, has hip surgery and he has back surgery. He's the hardest working fool I've ever seen, man. But he's like crawling on the ground with a broken back, like rebuilding one of our house, like this house we own in Birmingham, which is crazy. But I think it was a lot of stress that pushed him into this. But he had strokes in November. The second one was a botched surgery. So they were trying to clear a clot. Tool got caught in a towel. They turned that tool, sent blood straight into the brain. Boom, second stroke. So hemiparesis, right side, lost his ability to talk. His first thing he said was when Alabama hit that 4th and 31 against Auburn. Jalen Milroe hits him in the back of the end zone and goes, "Oh, roll tide." Fucking cry my eyes out, you know. And and we've been on a journey since, man. We were in Rome, Georgia. One of my best buddies, sports PT up there. They had great neuro PT. But we've been battling with urinary tract infection the entire time. Listeners who understand that, it presents like dementia in a lot of ways. It's like a full attack on the nervous system. So we'll ride this roller coaster of these kind of peaks and significant valleys. And we get back to my hometown, Mobile, and frankly, the care here is not very good. So I had to start employing like that's why I was joking yesterday on my stories with people like it. I was like, I think I'm just gonna call my shit never niche performance. And they thought it was funny. I was like, or pretty cool. I was like, no, I mean, I thought it was a joke, but this is like you develop such a skill set over time where you talk about the soul work, man. When I put his feet on my chest to do a leg press, and I think yeah, your listeners like can go and see that. But I'm putting his feet against my chest. I'm feeling him, man. Like I'm trying to feel if he's got pressure on that right side, if he's able to really drive through with me. And so a lot of it is like just trying to understand what his body is capable of on any given day. I don't know if you've ever worked with people with MS, but it's kind of like that, where they'll present amazing one day and then they come to you and they're slumped over and they're kind of fucked up. They're not able to. Um, and so the big thing for me with that is like a restoration of hope. Um, this tattoo on my arm for my cousin Taylor Hawkins, he was the drummer of the Foo Fighters. In a side project he goes, I was talking to a friend of mine, said he lost his faith, so I gave him mine. And
Mm.
that's the role I'm playing. Because my dad, he's kind of lost some faith, right? He knows he's not going to be the man he was before. I told him we got to enter into a shaman era.
Mm.
It's time to become like more of a spiritual being since he can't put out these same physical outputs, you know.
And what's the kind of angle with the physical training? Like where is he struggling? What are you working with it? Are you trying to regain like range of motion? Is it just getting him moving to provide him like hope of like, okay, I can get some of this physical stuff back so we can enter into that next like era? Like what's he struggling with it? Like all of those type of things. Like what's it kind of look like? I want to know the story.
Yeah, it's all a struggle, man. So, I mean, really big thing for me right now is trying to create knee extension and hip flexion. We don't think he's ever going to be able to understand how to create dorsal or plantar flexion again.
Okay.
It's possible, but he has to believe. Like he has to really believe. And sometimes he loses that belief. When he has it, things like, dude, I cried last week because he started moving his knee in a way like super electric. Like there was a lot of twitch with it, and he kept being able to repeat it. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even believe this just happened. And it was through like we were doing, if you kind of notice, like I'm leveraging underneath his leg to create like a leg extension machine because we don't have nice stuff. So a big thing for me right now is getting his legs actually, you know, to where he has some confidence to walk on that side. Dad loves to get a pump in. He loves a good pump. I mean, it triggers something, man, like pure joy. And if you've caught some of it, we're also playing with the basketball. So I'm getting him to like rip it and rotate and dribble and kind of pass it back and forth and trying to get this reactionary stuff. A big part of this is we're playing a motor learning game. I think that's where a lot of us coaches, like we fucking forget that should be our role. That's the physical education that everybody's scared of. All those games you play, all you do is play. It's called fucking motor learning. What are you talking about? It's the greatest thing I can do for these athletes. Fools. It's just absolutely foolish. So I'm sitting, he goes, well, I can't do it. I said, well, it doesn't matter. The effort there to try to connect, and I'll be honest with you, dude, we microdose mushrooms.
Mm.
You know, if I could heroic dose that dude without him freaking out, I would. But yeah, we microdose and I try to get these new neural pathways, right? So I try to set him up in positions where he's going to fail it's predictable he will fail. And we've done that recently, and he's found success, you know? So I just believe in kind of, it's no different than working with young people. It's just a matter of motor learning. It's just far more difficult when you're an adult, and it's even more difficult when you've had strokes.
Dude, the side note on the mushrooms, the nature, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but they I think he's working with maps, but they just got another study through Nature or article posted on psilocybin, and the brain scans that they had were showing that the difference in brain organization from me not on mushrooms to me on mushrooms and 3 weeks post mushrooms, the difference in brain organization from me not on, from me to me being on, is the same difference from my brain to your brain. So what they were showing is like having that macrodose of mushrooms was literally making your brain a completely different brain, like seeing it and communicating in a completely different, to where my brain is communicating in a completely different way, in which it looks more like your brain than it did my old brain. And then it comes back and it shows after 3 weeks. But what they're showing is that different, that 3 week span that they have of the brain communicating in different pathways. And shoot, I'm blank. Micah Pollan was talking about this at the maps, where he's talking about how your brain, the neural pathways are like a ski slope, where it's like you go down, and after a while, it's kind of like these neural pathways are kind of like driven in, like you're kind of just going down the same paths over and over again. And what he was showing and talking about was that psilocybin psychedelics are a new, like, fresh sleet of snow over. So then you can take a slightly different path. But the study that was posted today, dude, it was so cool. It's showing that my brain can look like your brain and then come back to my brain. But that time period where it's looking like my brain, I can find new neural pathways to take. I'm like, dude, that shit is so fucking cool.
That's the coolest thing, man. You know, I love that. I mean, and that my dad was a psychonaut before, you know, all of this happened. And, you know, we've always been interested in kind of alternatives, right? And, you know, it clearly is helpful not only for me and my journey, but for him, you know. And you asked me like, what am I really thinking about with my athletes? It's the same thing I'm thinking about with him. It's like, all right, I need a lot of opportunities for failure. I need things to be extremely unpredictable and for them to have no idea where they're going to go next. And then I need a predictable model. You know, I do think structure is vital, and we pursue that with very simple tools, you know. And I don't know what it is about him getting a bicep pump, but man,
It works.
it fucking works, and we're gonna keep getting bicep pumps. And
Same with high
yesterday, dude,
schoolers, bro. Bro, you get high schoolers high
yesterday, bro,
pumped.
I had him like this. He's laying down. So you're obviously people can't see it if they're like listening, but he's laying down on this nugget. This is what little kids use to sleep on. So that's our platform. And I'm grabbing his right hand, okay, the one that really doesn't move. And I was like, I need you to curl. And this fucker, he's like, oh, everything he's got, he's using his left, his right hip, he's bridging up, and he's pulling off this bicep curl. You talk, that's some fucking max effort shit, man.
Mm.
And I knew he loved that, you know? I don't think he's ever done that before. No one's thought to do it, you know? It's pretty rad. And what a lot of times we do, Austin, is I'll show him on his left side what's possible,
Mm.
and we flip it back over. No different than whenever you have like the 8-year-olds, like, here's how we throw a baseball. I want y'all to throw like left hand through an obstacle course, because I never believe in standing straight across somebody. To create obstacle course, you got to throw like 10 times, all left, all your offhand. And then we'll come back. It's like, it's just joy because the chains are off, right? Handcuffs are off. You get to go, you know?
So what was his movement capabilities when it happened in November to where they are now? Like, what has been the progress been like? Well, like, what's that look like, and where is it currently at?
Oh man, I mean, there's some of this stuff, you know, I'll be as open as I can be. I mean, yeah, he couldn't do much of anything, you know, like could barely like move in bed, had no ability to stand up. It was all wheelchair. I mean, that's where the old time strongman lifts came into play in my life, you know, was like all the sandbag stuff that we do. It's like, this is it. Like, this is what I'm dealing with, because this is a body that he can't use his right side. So he was he was incapable. He had no ability to communicate other than to kind of like grunt and moan. And he was in so much pain initially with different types of nerve pain. He'd just be screaming at night for hours, dude. It was intense, and things you never thought you'd be doing in terms of like caring for his, you know, needs. We'll keep it as simple as that.
Mhm.
It's like, that a lot of it was also just kind of overcoming the ego, in a sense. There's like there's a vulnerability with this, with caretaking. And he couldn't move, he couldn't talk. And now we're getting to a place where, depending on if a urinary tract infection has happened again, he's able to really communicate quite well with his needs. He can be very funny. He can be quite adorable. It's pretty cute. Um, and I'd say most of the time after he and I work together, we've got some pretty damn good movement going on. I get him to kick a soccer ball, things like that. So we went from nothing and kind of no hope to potential to live a relatively fulfilled life in a physical capacity. Now, the conversations in between with he and I are built around like a spiritual pathway. I've got him reading different books that kind of like tap into that and to give him hope in a different sense. You know, it's like you can still be loved, you can still project love, you know, you can still feel all of these beautiful things and you still have wisdom to share. When I'm going through it, he knows, man. So he'll just give me a big hug. That's all I need, man. Yeah.
Dude, it's so fucking cool. So fucking cool. Your energy is so fucking cool. The way that you keep putting everything out there, dude, it's contagious. It gets me fired up. It really does. It's seeing you dancing on it, social media, and doing like it's like, dude, the dude is just fun. Like he has energy. What was the word? What was the word that you're obsessing about right now?
Oh, sincerity.
Sincerity. It's very, very sincere on Instagram, and it's beautiful, dude. I just want to say that it really is beautiful, and it's really cool to watch somebody have again the balance of the masculine side of like this dude's a fucking dude. You take off the shirt, you have fucking abs, you jacked, everything like that, but also just having the feminine side and being sincere and being able to post art on there while you're going through the chaos that is life. I just think it's fucking cool, dude.
Appreciate that, man.
Dude, and I appreciate you coming on and ripping this for us. I know I kind of took you. I fucking what are we almost hour 40 in, but dude, this was awesome. Appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, of course, man.
Do you wanna have people reach out to you, anything like that? Anything you wanna push out there?
Yeah, follow me on Coach Hayden Mitchell. Um, just trying to create this sort of journey for myself. I realized that, just kind of telling, your audience is like, I want to have more of a remote sort of opportunity to where I can drop in and out with my family and then leave and learn from some master teachers. There's primordial layers to this shit, Austin. You know, there's some deeper stuff. I was like, I've said, it's like I can take people to the grass, to the mountain, but there's these other layers, some of this feminine stuff that I kind of want to tap into in the movement world. So just kind of look for that because it looks like I'll be leaving the country here in the next few months to go on a little bit of a pilgrimage. So kind of
Fuck
stoked.
yeah, dude. Let's go. That's sick. I appreciate you being on. Appreciate you guys listening. Keep chopping wood.